episode 419 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Seth,
Michael O'Malley.
And we're joined by special guest on the YouTube stream, Bunyan the Blue. So, welcome to the podcast, Bunyan.
Hi there.
Thank you, Bunyan. It's really a pleasure to have you here.
Man, they're really missing out on the not YouTube version of this, I gotta say. Very ambiguous, just like our film we're talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah. What are they even talking about? What are they even saying? What does it mean?
All right, on this episode of Cinematary, we're going to be talking about movies that we saw this week in part 1. And in part 2, we're going to be putting a nice bow on this year's Young Critics Watch All Movies series with 1985's Angel's Egg. So, into the series. And we'll announce you got to stick around though to the very end, and we'll announce the upcoming series. So, that's just a point to, I guess you could skip till the end, but no, like listen to the podcast till the very end. All right, well let's go ahead and jump into movies that we saw this week. And Michael, I'm gonna kick it off with you. You saw it's a relative new release, but one I don't think we talked about on the podcast.
Yeah, this is a movie that I think before it was released, people were fairly excited about, and then people saw the movie and the hype just deflated instantly. And that is the movie Men, which came out earlier this year, directed by Alex Garland, who did like the screenplay for 28 Days Later, and he directed Ex Machina and Annihilation, and people generally seem to like Alex Garland. But people generally do not seem to like this movie. And I spent the spring kind of pondering, like, is it really as bad as people say? Because you look on, like, Letterboxd or whatever, and people are like 1 star or half a star. You know, this is such trash. And for my positive note, I will say that I don't think it's quite that bad. For my less positive note, it's not that good either. So this is a movie in which the main character, her name is Harper, played by Jessie Buckley, and she's pretty good. She's going out to the English countryside because she's recently experienced this traumatic tragedy involving her husband, where her husband has committed suicide. And so she's like taking a vacation to recover from that, get away from things. And so she's gone to the English countryside, and she stays in this nice old English manor that's owned by this guy whose name I don't remember. And the reason I don't remember is that he's played by Rory Kinnear, who plays literally all the other roles in this movie, except for like a few small roles. So I don't remember what this role is that he plays. But anyway, what ends up happening is that I mean, if you've seen something like Rosemary's Baby, or more like Repulsion, actually, is maybe like the kind of like closer parallel. But we've seen this sort of movie before. A person goes to an isolated place, has some sort of traumatic backstory, and slowly the trauma like kind of unravels her version of reality. And in this movie, she keeps seeing men who are all the same man, sometimes in different outfits, sometimes digitally de-aged so that they're children. But these men are all being kind of like chauvinist and gross to her in one way or another, like all these like microaggressions and eventually like just pure aggression toward her. And at the same time, like her reality is kind of collapsing. And it's just kind of tired, like, to be honest. It's the sort of movie where, like, first 5 minutes you watch it, and because there's been, especially recently, so many of these kind of, like, psychological horror thrillers with kind of like a, maybe, like, social commentary edge, but they're all inspired by Roman Polanski movies, and they're usually released by A24. Like, I'm not usually against those type of movies, but this one is not a very fresh take on that. And so it just ends up being kind of tedious. Which is a shame because there are some really nice elements of it. The cinematography is really neat. It looks really cool. The sound design is really great. Like, you have all these like chorals for the like choral arrangements for the score, and then that's like matched with these like really wonderful like there's like this echo motif, because early in the film she is in this tunnel and she finds out that she can echo, and the echo is delayed enough that she can then like harmonize with the echo, and so the movie then starts like playing that a lot, and that's really cool. And just the sound design in general of the spaces is really neat. Um, and so like there's like nice elements to it, and you could imagine like if this were like just forced itself to go more abstract and like have less of the like really obvious like wow men sure are problematic aren't they, it would have been really cool like if it had just been like full like psychedelic avant-garde sort of like horror. I think that there could have been something really neat out of it, but um, I don't know, in the end it just didn't have that much to offer, which is a shame because I think Alex Garland is not like a perfect filmmaker, but his films are usually memorable in some way. And the only reason that this is memorable is that it kind of sticks out as something that doesn't feel very interesting. And in fact, like the climax of the film, which I guess I won't spoil just because it is kind of like a fun like WTF moment, but the climax of it is weirdly like copying Annihilation at times as well. It's like this woman's encounter with like this otherworldly being, and it's like wordless, and there's all this weird body stuff going on. Like, it feels just like a retread of the ending of Annihilation, which I thought was super cool. Um, so I don't know, Alex Garland running out of ideas, maybe, or hopefully not. But this movie is definitely not an example of him doing fresh ideas. I don't know. I It's the sort of movie that probably will just be forgotten. I don't think it like is that notable. And aside from like the hyperbolically negative stuff people had to say about it at the like when it first released, I don't feel like it's had much staying power in people's minds whatsoever. Like it just seems to have hit and gone.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I think Ex Machina. People remember. I haven't watched it in so long. I'd be curious to revisit it.
Yeah, me too. I haven't seen this at the theater actually.
Yeah, because I think I saw it in the theater also. I remember liking it, but that's been a while. Annihilation has a lot of interesting ideas, but I don't feel like it all. It's kind of all over the place to a degree, but it visually is something that's you know interesting to behold. So I don't know. I'm not like firmly in the Alex Garland camp. I know he did a series for FX also that was kind of in this mold. But I don't. To me, and maybe I'm wrong. To me, the trailers and kind of how they marketed this seemed very like in the same vein as like Promising Young Woman, where it was like men equals evil, and we're gonna kind of play up that trope of like
That's definitely what the movie's
something along
doing,
those.
for sure.
Okay.
Like
It's
that's
like-
not a misleading trailer.
It seemed wild, like just Midsummer Light or something. When I saw the trailer, it's just like folk horror, and it being just a interrogation of men and women relationship dynamics or something like that.
Yeah, I
It
think
seems
that's what
like
it's going
wild.
for.
Maybe it was his idea of like raising some money real quick. Because it does seem like a surefire like shot as far as that's concerned. That's what like audiences are really into right now, especially if it has A24 slapped on it.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what he was doing, but it totally backfired because he's just like 5 years late or something.
He really is, and I mean, like Midsommar is a good comparison point because, like, in terms of the like social themes and all that, like Midsommar is a lot more like interesting and complicated while having like the same basic topic, and its story is just so much more engaging. Even though, like, I think Midsommar has like structural issues too. Like, it's not a perfect movie, but like, there's so many weird interesting angles that story goes, like with the like this like kind of reclusive society and their weird rituals and stuff like that, whereas this movie is, I don't know, it doesn't have anything interesting to offer at all besides like the kind of cool aesthetic flourishes that it occasionally has. Like there's like everything else feels autopilot. I don't know. I'm not like firmly Alex Garland camp in the sense that like I'm a partisan of him. Like I'm not gonna like sit here and try to reclaim this or anything like that. But I do like I have enjoyed everything that he's done that I've seen, and this is the first thing that just feels like I don't even know, why this movie was made really. Like I can see maybe the setting seemed kind of cool, this like English countryside folk horror, and there's like a few gestures toward like religious imagery, and sometimes it's like Christian imagery, and sometimes it's pagan imagery, and there's maybe like an interesting thing that was maybe in a subsequent draft of the movie could have been teased out more, but yeah, I don't know. Don't recommend. I don't strongly have feelings about it, which is maybe the the worst pan of all. You know, like the worst movies are just the boring
I think
ones.
it should have been a Prestige and the Illusionist kind of thing where they came out the exact same month, and he could have done that with
Yeah.
Midsommar, but like maybe the money just didn't come together and it only came out just now.
That's too bad. The missed
That would have
opportunity.
been a better strategy.
Or like when all those Snow White
No
movies
fail.
came out in the same year.
It's true. It could have been a Snow
Yes.
White. Was it
Strange.
Snow White the Huntsman? And I forgot the other one.
Mirror, mirror.
Yeah, so it could have been that.
I only remember that because I was working in a theater at the time.
All right. Well, Men is it? It's on demand now.
It should be. I got the DVD from Netflix.
But not in demand.
Yeah,
It's on
probably
demand, but it
in
is not in demand.
Not in demand.
All right. Well, you got one more you were going to talk about?
Yeah, so this is like a complete change of pace. So in the early 90s, there's a series of films that are all kind of like blanketed under this title, The Mind's Eye. And the first one I watched a few days ago, and it's called The Mind's Eye, A Computer Animation Odyssey. And
Oh man, I've always wanted to see these.
oh yeah, I watched it on YouTube. They're probably all on YouTube. But what it is it's like basically a compilation of decontextualized early CGI assets. And so like things that would be in like commercials, or I don't think they use this, but like, you know, that part in the like Money for Nothing music video, like it's like stuff that looks like that. And it's all stitched together so it looks like it's making this arc in which you're like in space, and then like you're like kind of tracking like the evolution of life on the planet and stuff, but it's all like kind of like abstract because one, it's early CGI, and two, these are like found objects as opposed to like new assets. And then there's like they composed original music over it, and this music is like, it's not vaporwave, it's like what vaporwave is referring to, you know, because obviously like this is the early 90s, but it's like that sort of like major synthy, like ambient textures, like new agey sort of thing. And it was just a good time. Like I just turned it on, and it was comforting and nice. And there's just something about that like early CGI, like pre, like even if you look at like Pixar stuff from this time, like it all just looks like tech demos, like even stuff that was commercially released. And uh, there's just something about it, like transcends the uncanny valley, because there's like no textures on anything, or very very small textures. And so everything just looks abstract, and it becomes like almost like this like I don't know, like kind of looks like modern art, like collage sort of thing, right? It's just a bunch of shapes, and these shapes are supposed to be like seaweed in the ocean. Um, and then like CGI, if you go a few years later, it gets to this point where it's too close to what it's supposed to be, and it just kind of looks ugly and crappy, you know, like ants or something like that. And this like hits that sweet spot of like really early rudimentary stuff, but so rudimentary that it just feels like ambient and strange and otherworldly, which really suits this movie. And like honestly, it feels a lot like Koyaanisqatsi in the sense of you're watching this montage of images, and these images are kind of meant to be like awe-inspiring or otherworldly images with this music that's buttressing it. But because instead of Philip Glass, you have this like highly digital and highly like dated sound, and because it is, instead of beautiful landscape or modern urban, you know, footage, you have these like almost like primordial computer images. It just, I don't know. It's just a really singular vibe, and like as someone who was around and can remember, I wasn't paying attention in 1990 because I was a infant, but um, a few years later, like I can remember that sort of stuff, and like just being captivated by like that Windows screensaver in which the thing is bouncing around in like just morphing shapes, and sometimes it's a cube, and sometimes it's a sphere, and sometimes it's this little clover looking thing. Like I remember just like spending lots and lots of time watching these like really basic computer shapes, and there's something that's always just kind of mysterious about them because they're not capable of rendering, the full artistic intent of like what they are.
Super uncanny.
Yeah, it's just like uncanny and interesting. So I don't know. Like this was like 40 minutes. Like it's not like some huge opus. But it was a good 40 minutes. Like I enjoyed it. I had just gotten back from work and I was tired and I was like, I can't watch any of these movies I have from the library. They're gonna take too much attention for me to watch, and so I just put on some headphones and watched this on my laptop on YouTube.
Opened your mind's eye.
Yeah, it did. It did. It would be like good. It would be good like sleep material too. Like if you like had it playing kind of low and like projecting on the wall, and you could just kind of drift off to like that kind of like half sleep state where you're kind of like halfway dreaming and halfway not. It would be good for that too. So, The Mind's Eye, 1990, courtesy of YouTube.com.
Nice.
And if you like this, there's like 4 or 5 other ones. There's Beyond the Mind's Eye, The Gate to the Mind's Eye, Odyssey into the Mind's Eye.
What?
Odyssey of the Mind's Eye apparently includes parts of Johnny Mnemonic, like CGI from that movie.
Of course it does.
So, there's lots where this came from, and I'm probably going to check out a few more of them because it was pretty fun.
Nice. All right, Seth, we're going to toss it over to you, and you're going to tell us which giant famous ape is still alive.
Yeah, his name is King Kong, and a lot of people don't know this, but he did not die when he fell off the well, boy, this one requires a lot of backstory.
We watched King Kong on the podcast already, so like they've got that.
No, but this is the alternate universe King Kong that came out in the 1970s with Jeff Bridges being the Jack Black of the whole thing. But he didn't go up on the Empire State Building. He went up on top of the World Trade Center because that's more hip and happening,
It's a little controversial, okay?
Yeah. Coincidence? I think not.
Foreseen.
I think not. If you look close, you can see the beginning of the end. But he falls off the World Trade Center, and they have everything else is the same. Where they're like, "'Twas beauty that killed the beast." It was, but then because he was in development hell for the sequel, that also is like, what? He's dead. I thought, but he is in a coma, they said, for 10 years. And we open in 1986. King Kong Lives is the title of the sequel that is very much forgotten. One of the most forgotten monster movies ever, basically. Like, I had dreams about this, like half remembered ideas of like what it was like watching my like VHS copy as a kid that I rented from like a drugstore or something, because it was just like I saw it once and like never again, like can't even find it at the library anywhere, like nowhere. And it finally got uploaded to YouTube the other day, and I was like very excited to watch it because I had always been thinking about this opening sequence, which is really bizarre, and it is just King Kong on a slab in a gigantic hospital that is a warehouse, and he's like hooked up to a huge, like, comically huge respirator, and all these little doctors are rushing around, and they got huge scalpels and huge surgical tools and stuff, and it I heard somebody in a review say that it like almost feels like a Monty Python sketch, because they literally do have these like humongous like knives that they're like, how are you gonna even like use that on him? But they're like,
I'm looking at him on Google right now. It's like, that's amazing.
It's so wild. And the whole thing is, yeah, he's been in a coma for 10 years, and the problem isn't that he like broke his back by falling off the World Trade Center. It's that 'twas beauty killed the beast, it seems. So his heart is the problem. he needs a heart transplant. So they have to they actually show you Linda Hamilton of Terminator fame is in this, and she's just wonderful and beautiful in a real stupid movie. But she's helping them.
What year did this come out?
86.
So this is post Terminator.
Oh, it is. I guess it is. Wow.
I'm
Man,
glad she used her star clout for good.
I know. For the good of the ape man. But they actually have this really gruesome scene where they pull out his heart and we see his huge heart with this like crane prize grabber machine. And then they just like dispose of the heart. Who knows what they do with it? But then they put this mechanical heart in him, and he has the mechanical heart now. And they like sew him back up, and it looks real gross and stuff. And this Kong is just a man in a monkey suit. It is not CGI or anything. Where it goes from there is basically, for some reason, because he has a monkey heart, it seems like he's no longer into little human ladies. He's into his own kind now. So maybe it's like somehow fixed him of his...
Wait, so does that imply that he had a human heart prior to this?
No, I mean, he had a regular...
Modern science is crazy.
I don't know. There's something wrong with him. I don't know. He was a strange King Kong ape person who was really into humans, and then they gave him a robot heart, and now he's into his own kind. So he goes out and he finds a lady that looks like him out. I forget where they even find her, but it's like this whole silly thing, and the main character is like a fake Indiana Jones person who's in it for like 20 minutes. It feels like, has sex with Linda Hamilton, and then I don't know. The rest is just King Kong trying to get his wife back, and he's trying to save his... She's also pregnant. The stakes are just getting higher and higher. And they're in the South, which is weird. I think for budgetary reasons, because they couldn't like blow up a bunch of buildings like they wanted to. So they were just like in the woods in the South. And there's all these like jokes with like rednecks running around. The real highlight is the procedural hospital drama involving King Kong at the beginning. And I wish it was the whole movie. It's like strangely morbid.
Just like King Kong and ER.
Yes, kind of feels like that. I wish it was the whole movie.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's minus the like other half of the movie, which is a real slog. But yeah, that was a wild one. It was good to touch my roots there.
Where's King Kong Lives available?
YouTube. That's the only way I saw it.
That's the hero of this podcast.
It really is.
YouTube sponsoring this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
We're streaming on YouTube.
Where you want to watch
giving you
Angels
Rex
Egg?
on YouTube.
There it is, YouTube.
There you go.
And then my second choice is a pretty wild fucking movie called R100. And it came out in 2013. I believe it's a Japanese movie. I might be wrong. But I had seen another movie by this guy called Big Man Japan, which is like a surrealist like riff on like Johnny Sacco kind of, or like Ultraman. It's really, I don't know, it's really strange, but it is like kind of falls into the genre of giant monster movies. This one, however, I don't know, I almost hesitate to like tell people about it because I went in totally blind at movie night and someone brought it. And I just had no idea where it was going to go. Because where it begins, at least, is this guy signs over his life in a like crazy magical contract with this secret society of dominatrix people. That wherever he is now, the rest of his life, a big, sexy, tall, leather-clad lady could just jump out at any point and beat the shit out of him. And that's what he wants.
I think we all deal with that to an extent.
Yeah, you know. But we don't all, like, actually put the pen to paper, and this guy does. And it just gets crazier and crazier from there because, like, the dominatrix people have to keep upping the ante, it seems, or something for him to, like, truly be entertained by it, or at least like they're like, well, you know, like we can't just keep jumping out of bushes, we gotta like kidnap your family now and like really put the vice on you and all kinds of stuff like that. And it's like becomes like a crazy like chase movie at a certain point. It gets very surreal because there's like a mystical element. But it's all in all, it's like this just crazy cartoony comedy. I'm a big fan of it, but it's definitely like it's definitely like jumps the shark. It like goes like really far. So I don't know. Go in with a very open mind, and it'll just keep on getting opened.
Is this also available on YouTube?
Go in.
No, I don't. I think it was actually on Hulu. Oddly enough.
Okay.
I'm sure you can find it maybe on YouTube. So like, let's keep pushing that.
I don't know. YouTube is not what it used to be. Where
You're talking about jumping the shark. Peak YouTube era was right when they lifted the like 10-minute cap, and everyone just uploaded a bunch of like complete albums, like all these vinyl rips, just like flooded YouTube.
Oh, yeah. That's how I got into so much music, and how I like basically watched a bunch of Criterion Channel movies before I knew what the Criterion collection was. I feel like, because it was just like loading it with any like strange movie. I think I saw like Blue Velvet on there, but you had to like watch them all in like parts, like 10 minutes of Blue Velvet at a time.
Bring back Wild West YouTube.
As David Lynch intended, 10-minute intervals. All right, we're gonna take a quick break, and then we're gonna be talking about everybody's favorite egg, Angel's egg, after this. And we're back with part 419 of Cinematary. In this part, we're going to be continuing, or actually concluding, our Young Critics Watch Old Movies series with 1985's Angel's Egg. The film is written and directed by Mamoru Oshii, and the film stars Jinpachi Nezu and Mako Hayodo. Angel's Egg follows the life of an unnamed young girl living alone in an undefined building near an abandoned city. She cares for a large egg, which she hides under her dress, protecting it while scavenging the decrepit neo-Gothic Art Nouveau cityscape for food, water, and bottles.
Scavenging for food, water, and bottles.
All right, I love this brief plot synopsis.
It's a fairly straightforward movie.
That's all it is. Yeah, let's just end the podcast there. I don't think we have anything else to talk about.
It's very straightforward.
Yeah, you just big spoilers that you gave. God damn it.
Prior to the production on Angel's Egg, Oshii lost his faith in Christianity. Censors of Cinema opined that the film, quote, seems informed by the existential desperation caused by the collapse of one's belief system. Oshii himself has stated he does not know what the film is about. The film repurposes ideas that Oshii developed for a canceled Lupin III film, which later became Legend of the Gold of Babylon. Both concepts focus on a mysterious girl, while The Angel's Egg is based on the canceled film's Angel Fossil. In an interview...
Oh, but it never happened, though, right?
I can't imagine a Lupin III movie occurring within the universe of this movie.
It's just like, and picking up where we left off.
Just him like going... like around like in this world. In an interview at the Toronto International Film Festival about the movie, Oshii said, "I have a feeling that I'm creating a story which, if left alone, is gradually absorbed into classics. The image of the movie was that of something pure coming out of an actually much more suspicious world filled with dubious nothings. Gradually, it was purified into an art film. I didn't think it would become a purified world, but what had been done so far, strangely enough, has the face of a classic. While making this film, I ended up thinking I was forging a classic." He went on to say, I think film is a genre which has a certain shadiness. Even though everything about movies is made through artificial means, they show an artsy appearance in some respects. When trying to attach something to this particular movie, I think I ended up, as expected, giving it the appearance of a classic work. That is why, besides the girl having all the characteristics of the image of little girls, was also drawn, emanating a strange intensity while carrying the egg. Angel's Egg did not do well with critics on its release, and Oshii stated that, quote, it kept him from getting work for years. However, it is considered, quote, one of the highlights of artistic anime in his career as a director.
They were just he's just like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I was making a classic. I like decided to make a classic. That's what it sounds like. 'Cause I mean he did, but wow. Yeah. That's like Kubrick or something.
So
I think I'll just decide to use some elements that will make it a classic today.
he was like, I know what I'm dishing, you know?
Even though I don't know what it's about.
So Angel's Egg, had you all seen this before?
I had.
Yeah, girl.
Okay. So what
Yeah, I slept a lot to it, I feel like.
it would be a good sleepy movie.
It would. Yeah, I thrive in these sort of just like dark, meandering cities and with rain in them movies for sure. And I would just like have it on and I would relax. And I don't know. I just like instantly took to this one. It was everything I could ask for. I feel like, but only more recently. I mean, this was the most intensive viewing I ever had of it. Of just like actually like really being engaged and not splitting it up at all and like watching it all the way through at like 5 p.m. today was a fucking amazing experience actually.
So how many times, Michael, had you seen this?
This is my second.
What were your impressions the first time, kind of just taking this in?
Well, the first time I was drawn to it, this is a few years ago, because I looked at the cover, like the poster, and I was like, that looks like the cover of a Final Fantasy game. And it turns out that one of the big artists in this film, Yoshitaka Amano, whose name I'm probably not pronouncing correctly, but he does a lot of the artwork for Final Fantasy games. And so I thought that was cool. I kind of came into this like with a video game mindset, and I think that the film has like a quality that a lot of video games in subsequent years would come to have, like exploring kind of desolate architecture in these really like, you know, lonely cavernous spaces, you know. Like if Andrew were on this podcast, he'd be talking about Dark Souls, which I think is like, you know, definitely a reference point that you could make. But like, I don't know, there's just like, there's something very like video gamey about the way that it's all like just exploration. And so like the first time I was watching this movie, I was thinking about it through that lens because I had that association. And this time I was maybe less thinking about that, and I was more like intrigued by what I ended up thinking the first time, which is that, well, now that I've watched this and seen it through a video game lens, it actually feels like a Tarkovsky style video game where there's like these like long stretches of like space in the movie, and hanging over all these religious themes, or like religious portents, including like a cryptic final shot, you know, that could have been in Nostalgia or Mirror or something like that. So like this next time I was more paying attention to that, and I thought that was super interesting as well. It's like a sort of movie, I guess because Oshii says he doesn't know what it's about, that it feels like there's all these little tantalizing things that you can kind of choose to pay attention to in the movie if you want, but none of them are things that when you pay attention to them, it becomes the whole movie, you know? Like if you watch a movie like, I don't know, to name another religious movie like Mother, like the Aronofsky Mother movie, like once you get into your head like, oh, this is like a retelling of the Bible through a particular lens, like that's what the movie becomes, and that like interpretation takes over the whole thing. And that's cool, but what I was noticing this time is that the movie gives so much space, and so much of the movie is just slow and taken up by watching like little small animated characters walking through these like huge like rooms. There's something about that approach that makes it hard to say like this is what the movie is about. And so it kind of, at least for me, these two times I've had two very different viewpoints coming out of the movie, and neither of them feels definitive. They just feel like an experience that I had.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to say that about a lot of, I mean, he said it in his interview, arty movies, which, I hesitate to just throw that on this. But I do think it's one of those where it's just like every time you watch it, whatever baggage you're bringing, whatever particular variable that you wind up sort of honing in on is like sort of what you'll get at the end when you get sort of cashed out. And it'll be something new every time. I feel like there's a lot in here. But then again, it doesn't feel. It feels dense, but not like a book. It feels more like you're just staring at a canyon. Like there's a lot to see out here, but it's all there. It's all and it's all like announcing itself, and a lot of it, I think it has a reputation as like, WTF, like the whole thing is super opaque. But I don't think it's necessarily like the dialogue is, you could compare it to like Lynchian dialogue or something where they are just saying sort of just like these phrases. They aren't necessarily real conversations. That just like, they're like, who are you? Why did you come here? Oh, I can't tell you about the egg. I couldn't tell you about that. All these sort of just like statements and things. But at the same time, again, similar to Lynch, there is like a real earnest emotion behind a lot of it. It seems like it really does want to communicate. It's just doing things in a different way, and doing things maybe in a more free way rather than having. I don't know. It feels like someone making something with a blindfold on mentally, sort of just like going into it and allowing things to come out. It feels very like a mystical exercise in that way, and I really appreciate it for that.
It seems it very much, he mentioned, he talked a little bit about film as a genre. I think more film as an art form. It feels very much like a movie, like it's using cinematic language really well, because you're thinking if this was like a short story or something like a essay in a book or something, you could make it happen, but it would be, you would just have all this, you would have to like describe this kind of dystopian city. You would have to describe her and what she's doing. Everything would have to like have this vivid description in writing. And I think what's interesting about this is it lets you kind of float around in this world without really giving you any context to what happened. Why is she here? Why is she carrying an egg? Like it's more just kind of letting the visuals suck you in, and it's it's one of those movies that I think people who are like those like crazy story people who are like there has to be a story would just get infuriated within 5 minutes. But I think if you just kind of ride the wave of how the visuals are kind of guiding you along, it's a kind of a very fascinating watch in that sense.
Yeah, I think it.
That said, like there is a story. It's just that the story doesn't.
It's
and
not.
The story is fairly straightforward.
It's not explicit, and it's not like trying. It's not. I think the
there's
story
A's getting to B, and like.
Yeah, I think the story's like, but I think the story is more expressed through the visuals rather than like there's no exposition, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, I think also like a David Lynch movie, like there is the story in the sense that you can track what happens visually, like with the characters, but then you're left wondering like, why did I watch this series of images? Like I can tell that like this thing happened and then this thing happened, but like the larger significance of like what the story is there for is, I think, the more opaque part. And I don't know, like it's kind of interestingly cryptic in that way, because like some like experimental or like art films, it's hard to tell what is going on because it is like non-linearly constructed, or it's just really confusing what's happening. And I don't feel like that's the case for this one, but it's also one of these things where you see the story and just kind of lays it down, and you're like, okay, it's almost like myth in a way, where you're presented with this kind of like odd thing, and it feels like one of those like myths where you read it and it's like, okay, I understood that the turtle found dirt at the bottom of the lake, and then when he brought it up to the top of the lake, it became the earth. But why? Like, and this movie works the same way, where it's like, I understand that this girl had the egg, and that the guy then destroys the egg. I guess spoilers, but whatever. And then the girl, like, things happen. Like, I understand, I can summarize the things that happen, but the why is the weird part.
It's what we're left to do as an audience, where we are now sort of here to pick up the pieces and build something with it a bit, and just to sort of see what we can do with a lot of it. I mean, yeah, I agree. A lot of stuff does happen. I tried to track it. Like, I made notes this time. Like, it's so like just like bullet points. Like, lots happens. Like, there's a lot of like, and a lot of continuation of like motifs and items come back up. Like, the big thing is water, and like she's got a jug, and like she's carrying it from one place to another and filling it up, and then she gets another jug, and then like we figure out that there's a shop that's full of jugs, and she gets another jug, but there's red juice in that jug, and she got to pour that out to put blue juice in it, and like all that kind of stuff, which is just, even in a little thing like that, is just like, that's basic, like going here to there, and getting an item and making A into B, but there it's really left to us to do some math there and be creative with what we're given, which is kind of the thing about like quote unquote story people, is like, I don't know, that's really is not what people are not looking for. Stories and plot necessarily like they say they are. I mean, quite often it is just they want some sort of like particular satisfaction or comfort.
Well, it's one
for
thing,
a piece to give them.
Yeah, and it's one thing to be like, I get it. Sometimes you are entertained by like where the script leads you in dialogue and things like that. Absolutely, like I have movies like that as well. But
yeah, he was his brother the whole time.
Yeah, but I think the thing that frustrates me, and not to again, like everybody can watch movies how they want, but I think there's a little bit of a limited view when you're just like, this would be a movie I feel like would infuriate modern audiences, just because there seems to be this like incredible desire to, like, everything has to match up and make sense. Like, if she's going to be there at the beginning, it has to align at the end. It can't, it's whether it's the puzzle box mentality, whether it's the A must meet B mentality. And I think that's, to me at least, and this is strictly with movies, like, it's a disservice to movies to put that label on it, because at the end of the day, movies are a visual medium, and it should be telling the stories visually with less words. Like, the words are less important in a movie than they would be in a play, than they would be in a book, what have you. Like, it's just less important. Even in TV, dialogue is much more important in TV. But with movies, you need to guide, like, the best movies guide people visually and challenge these ideas visually. And I think this would be a movie, if for people watching today, would really struggle with, because like you said, Seth, it doesn't give you answers necessarily in the end. It kind of just leaves it open-ended, leaves it ambiguous. It doesn't really provide any backstory to what this all is, and you're left to kind of interpret it as you will. And I just feel like there's a large swath of audiences today who don't want that. They want like a whole rundown of what everything means. I was looking on YouTube when I watched the movie, and there's so many Angel's Egg ending explained, or Angel's Egg breakdown
theories.
Yeah, and
in the age of theories, and that's fine. Canon.
But like, at the end of the day, like, I guess my overall rant is like, embrace the ambiguity a little bit more and just focus on your experience of watching it.
I think people should embrace the ambiguity too, but I will say that like, this movie feels like the kind of movie that like puzzle box, like YouTube explainer videos were made for, because it like, it has such tantalizing threads that like kind of they seem to demand explanation. Like, for example, the whole like recurring motif about the bird, like with the egg, like there's this whole kind of like context in which like the Noah's Ark story from the Bible has become kind of a legend that's taken on its own life, like outside of the context of the Bible, or if there ever was a Bible in this universe, I don't know. But like,
Right, it's changed.
it's changed, right? Because like the ark never finds land, and the dove never returns to the boat, right? And then that like becomes like the bird skeleton in a way. Like, I don't know. There's things about this movie that all like. I'm not saying that this is the best way to approach the movie, but it is a movie in which like it tickles your brain with these like potential like mind, quote unquote, like mind-blowing things, and there's the final shot where it zooms out, and like, is that meant to be like the arc? I'm not exactly sure what's going on with that final shot, but like I think that there's like there's a closed circuit element to this. Like, some mysterious movies feel like completely open, like they're just pulling in um, wild experimental elements. But this movie, everything is recursive in and on itself, and I think that like makes a temptation to try to explain it, because everything seems to be interconnected in this kind of interesting way. And I like the idea of a movie that's like that can't be explained, which I think is maybe like something that this movie is gesturing toward. But I can also understand like why someone would see this movie and be like, I gotta make a 30-minute YouTube video explaining all the symbolism or whatever.
I think you're saying it better than I was able to, which is that aspect of it. It doesn't feel like what the fuck random. Like a lot of like experimental film and like difficult art kind of has that stigma, and quite often wrongfully so, and especially in instances like Angel's Egg is a good example of that. That I think things, while they may not even be totally knowable by its author, there are like there are sentences there. Maybe the sentences don't complete, but there's threads for us to like pull on and a lot to think about. And yeah, like any good piece of art, I feel like for an hour I could talk about it in one way, and then it flips on its head and I start talking about it in the opposite way, because it does a lot. Where I want to I there's one way of watching it where you just feel it, and then there's another way of watching it where you can just go on and on. It's very rich. Like, it reminds me of like a Thomas Pynchon book or something like that, in that the trick with Thomas Pynchon is like you're immediately like overwhelmed, like something like Gravity's Rainbow, that like, and it's purposefully made like in a way that it's just like nobody gets everything that's going on here. There's too much. There's purposefully too much. But the flip side is that like you can go in and just sort of like get into the rhythm of how it feels to be in this world, and like you sort of you pick it up and you figure it out, and then you lose it again, and you pick it up and you figure it out and you lose it again. And then there's the other way of reading it, which is like if you wanted to take every sentence and like look up what every little like reference to history is, you could find a lot there, which in that way it's like that's the fingerprint of a good author, I think, a good artist, that these things that we are left with, we can do a lot with, and in different ways.
Yeah, I think like one of the things that's cool about this movie, and it is the way it uses like its uh, post-apocalyptic, whatever we want to call the world that it is, but a world in which like the context of like how we got here has been lost, not just to ourselves, like not just to us the viewer because we've been uninformed, but to the characters who are living in this too. Like, the characters are living in a world in which whatever created the certain circumstances that resulted in the world that they see around them, they themselves don't 100% understand, and so they're left to kind of mythologize their own existence within this emptiness and ruin. And I think that that's really interesting, and is also maybe something that also appeals to the like the gaming legacy of this as well. Like again, if Andrew were on here, he could talk about Dark Souls, but like one of the kind of compelling things about Dark Souls is the way in which you are presented with the world, and a lot of the details are kind of opaque, and it's hard to tell like why the things exist in this way in the world. And so you have to make inferences and kind of mythologize the environments in the world. And this, by having its characters, this movie having its characters do that same thing that we the audience are doing, we're like invited into the space that these characters inhabit, because they are having to tell stories about how they exist. They tell the story of Noah's Ark, or their own version of Noah's Ark, and we as viewers have to look at this and tell stories about what is going on here, whether that's like just kind of like fabulous, kind of like allowing this thing to be an aesthetic object that's overwhelming, or like kind of burrowing down into, okay, well, this is actually a story about lost faith and like all that sort of stuff. Like there is an element of this invites us to make narrative out of something that we don't quite have complete access to, which I think is like a Pynchon thing as well. Like a big thing in Thomas Pynchon is this like propensity of characters to find threads among like really disparate things and kind of become like obsessed in a conspiracy that may or may not exist. Like that definitely happens in Gravity's Rainbow, where the human brain wants to see patterns and create narrative out of like just the chaos of what a world is. And you're born into the world knowing nothing about the world, and as you experience this huge world that has like a context that is so far out of your ability to understand it completely, you have to story tell in order to have a meaningful existence within it. And I think it's cool how this movie's doing that.
That's how reality works. Like that's the thing about experimental media, that it's like it's easy to call it far out and like opaque, but like that's it rings true to me when I get in there. And maybe that's also what deters people. Like I get it. Like maybe that's really what feels like homework, is like I do this all day, where like I have to like be at a party and pretend I know what people are talking about, right, in order to just like exist sometimes, or like just pretend like I know how politics works or my car works and stuff like that. But I like have to just go through my day. I have to continue. And in the same way, like when you're watching an experimental movie or reading an experimental book, a lot of the times you like come up against these walls, and you like, the choice is to like throw the thing at the wall, or like continue through and just to sort of like almost bullshit through sometimes in order to get to various rewards. I don't know. And also just to move forward. I think it's a decent lesson to learn sometimes.
Have you guys ever watched Neon Genesis Evangelion?
See, I've never gotten to the carrot at the end.
Yeah, that's kind of the opposite thing, where it presents you with a conventional narrative and then eventually pulls the rug out, and you're just swimming in just surreal, like bizarre stuff. But I do feel like that the way that this movie is a direct influence on that. Like there's no way, like it does the same thing where it just is throwing in this kind of like warped imagery from like the like Judeo-Christian tradition, but in a way that is decontextualized and defamiliarized. But yeah, anyway, I don't know. I think that's a completely different way to do it, though, because of the way that it lures you in with convention. We're gonna watch big like mech and kaiju battles, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, surprise! This is like to the end of 2001: A Space Odyssey. All of a sudden,
Oops.
Yeah.
Well, if you want a very coherent explanation of what happens in that movie, I think it was episode 200, and Andrew's drunk and explaining it to everybody.
Oh my gosh.
So,
I didn't get
no
that
problem.
far into it.
Easy. No problem. Just like Zach at the beginning of the podcast, just like totally explaining Angel's Egg, and then like, why are we still talking about it? Like that's the end of it.
it's true. I just try to ruin it. This one was it was interesting. So this was my first time watching it, and like I don't know. I don't really have too much of like concrete thoughts to establish to it. I mean, I think I didn't really come in. Michael, you were talking about at the beginning that you can't kind of came in with this mindset of viewing it through the lens of like a video game. I really didn't know what I was getting into. I just kind of watched it and let it kind of wash over me, and so I like I say this not like I'm gonna ignore it forever, but I didn't get much from it this time because I didn't really know, like I was just trying to kind of get my bearings to a degree. But it's definitely one that I'll come back to and kind of look at it through the lens of one, I know what's going on this time, and trying to kind of better prepare myself to kind of be on the wavelength of the movies going with. But also it's just the nice thing also is it's such a short movie, it's such a short film that it kind of gives you that opportunity to watch it, have repeat watches without like just investing a lot of time. I mean, it's about the same amount of time as like an episode of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
So
it definitely rewards repeat viewing. I get why somebody might not want to, but I'm glad you brought up that it's short, because that is like definitely something that's a fine critique of experimental media, that quite often it's just like you're already giving me like 10 times more than just a regular movie, okay? Like, or a regular like band that is like throwing free jazz at you. And it's just like, you guys could just play a 20-minute set and it would just like totally blow my mind, and I would go home and think about it for a while. Like, I praise experimental art that can be brief like and merciful.
And that's the thing. And that's the thing that, like, it's not like a 2.5 hour like bunker down. No, it's like an hour. It's literally like an hour, 10 minutes, if that. I mean, it's about the same as watching an episode of Game of Thrones or any sort of TV of that ilk that is about a little over an hour. And this one doesn't have like unnecessarily graphic scenes for no reason. So no, it's definitely one that I'm excited. I think I'll appreciate or have more to say on repeat viewings, but it was tough to like really nail down how I felt about it after just the one viewing this time.
One thing that I actually did not realize the first time I watched this movie, that's more of like a meta thing, but I did not like connect the name Mamoru Oshii to his later movies, which are arguably more famous, like Ghost in the Shell. This is the same director as Ghost in the Shell. And that didn't occur to me until I looked this guy up. I was like, hey, I'm watching this movie for the second time. What else has he done? And I was like, Ghost in the Shell, what the heck?
He did it before this?
No. This is like 7 or 8 years after, I believe.
Oh, okay. So he was fine. He was doing okay.
Yeah.
Also, brief movie. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, but this feels so different from Ghost in the Shell. Whereas like Ghost in the Shell is kind of like really dense and like there's a ton of information, and you have to like understand all these like sci-fi like philosophical concepts. This kind of achieves its effect by being so like it's just so wide open and spacious, and I don't know, it's just interesting to compare the two in my head, because it hadn't occurred to me at all that there was an overlap between these two movies, and they have the same director.
Well, you keep on talking about video games, and I have to keep reminding myself of like how it felt to watch this movie like the first time I saw it, which was just me still having only a little grasp of anime in general, and it already being this like so it has like a sort of like a like 2 layers of strangeness, like, well, a bunch of layers of strangeness, but like for a first time viewer, it's like not only is it an experimental film, but it's an experimental animated film, which already is like this thing that like cartoons, even now is like still like the stigma is cartoons are for kids or something, and like the stigma of anime is like, while it's becoming more like pervasive and stuff, like anime is like sort of more or less for most viewers in the realm of television and easy consumption and like boom boom like Naruto, like fast moving plots and a lot of fight scenes. So it's very interesting to happen upon Angel's Egg that is just like an anime episode, again, like Zach said, is like basically an episode length or something, but it's been blown up. Like something happened and like we're missing pieces to the episode. It's very strange, and the only, I don't know, I'm sure there's a list somewhere, but like I don't know if I've ever encountered an anime that's even close to becoming this like experimental and like just slow cinema. I don't know. It's very interesting to see the medium do this.
I think like not even anime specifically, but just like animated films in general. Like there are so few animated films that feel like this, you know, because animated films are so genre and convention beholden usually. Like even like when you get into,
They can't take their time.
yeah, like even when you get into like kind of like the edgier, like artier animation, a lot of times they have conventions that they draw on, you know, like, you know, oh, we're the edgy adult animation, or we're you know, Disney animation, or we're trying to be something that's kind of like a Miyazaki film or something like that. But there's like so few of them that are like this, but I'm surprised that there's not more because of, I would imagine, having these huge backgrounds that you don't have to animate and then just small characters that you animate in them, oftentimes on repeated animation, like that fire scene. Like I imagine that was like fairly easy to, in the context of making an animated film, like fairly easy to do. You're repeating a few frames for a long time, but very few films are doing this kind of like slow, deliberate pace. Even when you get into the more experimental animation, and I just think it's curious that no one's, to my knowledge, done a lot like that.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And yeah, it does seem like even Brackage or something is about moving fast moving, like rapid fire images and things like that, even though he's like maybe the, you know, the cusp of animated film or whatever you want to call what he does. But slowing it down is very interesting, and also like that's when, like you said, Evangelion is where things get strange. Is when I like, from what I've heard, is like when they just start, like they run out of money and they can't afford to like make giant mechs move around the screen a bunch of times, so they start like just like using stills and like
Yeah, Evangelion's kind of like also the fast because they're not like animating things for very long scenes, and so it's all like kind of like super cutting all these different like fragments that they have. But yeah, I don't know, like more like slow cinema, slow animated cinema. Let's get that
yes,
going.
please. Yeah, absolutely. I was also going to, and just I feel like we've been dancing around it, but if we like, you know, it's a kind of anti-theory, but if we're, what kind of, like, I don't even know which part of it to dive into, but like maybe even just like the last scene, like, is it like a like a Mobius strip kind of thing where she's like, so the beginning is like him, like the guy with the weird gun sword, and he's like looking at the huge ship that is like maybe like Noah's Ark or something, but it's like a ship coming down, and she's on it. She like comes out of it, and then at the end, she's like a stone statue on the ship. I'm just like,
Is it like, I don't want to get like too explainy because it's a movie that defies it, but like
I already, yeah.
there's all the like imagery, like all the religious imagery, and I have to imagine like it's called Angel's Egg, right? And she's the one who has the egg, so is she like some sort of like celestial being, or like maybe representative of the celestial being because she comes down out of the sky, right? Like, and then at the end of the movie, she like goes back up like as a statue into the sky or something. I don't know. There's something like vaguely sinister about it though too.
Yeah, like when yeah, the sinister part comes for me when she's like kind of optimistically talking about how she has an egg, and she's explaining a little bit about like how there's a bird and like it's a good bird or something. I forget what she says, but that's when they show like the fossilized,
The like terrifying looking
like
beast.
Archaeopteryx angel creature that's in stone, and then the guy is like looking at it and he's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, you think that's a good thing or something." But it seems like that's, I forget what they say, but it seems like that's where there's like sort of a split between her optimism about whatever an angel is and then like sort of this like horrible reality of what like an angel is, or like what an angel isn't, like the fact that maybe it's just a fucking animal, like, and it's gross looking. I don't even know. Yeah.
Did you guys watch Seth? I know you don't watch TV, but Midnight Mass.
No.
Well, there's like, it's not important to get into what it is, but there's like something that's kind of parallel to that, where someone finds this like demonic looking creature that they're convinced is an angel, and this demonic looking creature just like wreaks total havoc, and does awful things, but the like this like very devout person is convinced it is like a celestial being. And I wonder if there's something like that going on. I mean, if you're like in the Bible, like angels are supposed to be like super scary and terrifying, or at least like otherworldly, and so they're scary because of that reason. And I kind of wonder, like, in the context of Oshie having like lost his Christian faith, if like, I mean, the thing that is supposed to be beautiful about like divine beings is your kind of like faith in the goodness of them, right? Like, and the fact that they're so powerful and awe-inspiring and like ineffable, that's like a good thing if you believe that that is like a benevolent thing. But once you stop believing that's a benevolent thing, it's like a really disturbing idea that there are these like, you know, all-powerful beings like capable of doing all sorts of things within our natural, like within the world, you know, capable of upending the rules of reality. And uh, it becomes kind of like a threatening thing, maybe, if you no longer have faith in that sort of system. Um, and maybe that's kind of like what's going on here. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, removing the blindfold a little bit.
Any last thoughts on Angel's Egg before we wrap up?
It's dope.
Yeah.
It's also on YouTube in a fairly good quality
Yeah.
video too.
If you click on the second hit. I would also say if people are into this, I'm even prepared. I have it right here. It's called Dahlgren by Samuel R. Delaney. It is.
I've been meaning to read this for years.
It's my favorite book. And it's like Angel's Egg. It's very easy to say that it's a sci-fi or something, but it's this sprawling, like, experimental sort of book. And I was really surprised watching the movie, because I just started rereading it, and I started like making a list on Letterboxd of movies that are like, Dahlgren is one of those that is just like, it seems like it's impossible to make an adaptation of because it's so strange and experimental. But I started making movies of like, maybe like these are movies that, like, if you pulled them all together, that's what Dahlgren would look like. But it's about a mysterious, like, dilapidated city, like a post-apocalyptic city that the main character wanders through, and it's all about, it similarly like has the themes of forgetfulness. Like a lot of it is about that he can't remember who he was before he came into the city. He can't remember his name. A lot of the people in the city, it's like a refuge for just people who just can't remember things. The streets change, but it all has this sort of like, similar to Angel's Egg, this like beauty in ruin, and there's a lot of like surreal imagery similar to Angel's Egg in that way, that there's like finding like divine beauty that is also maybe like, if you turn it another way, is like really gruesome. But yeah, I don't know, that is in the vein. And yeah, I love Angel's Egg. I'm so glad I could be on the podcast about it, because I've realized it does mean a lot after this viewing. It kind of shot up in my list of favorites, I would say.
Well, like we said, you can find Angel's Egg on YouTube, good quality with English subs. So check it out there. And it's, as we mentioned, it's not that long. All right, well, I'll wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary and on Twitter and Instagram at Cinematary. And catch up with all the movies that we talked about in this episode at Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram as we head off to TIFF. Next week, we'll be having updates on movies we saw and reactions and such there from myself, Reed, and Andrew. So if you've not followed us on those two platforms, do so now. If you would like to support the show, head over to patreon.com/Cinematary. You can do it, whether it's $1, $5, what have you. We'll take whatever if you're a fan and would like to just support the work that we're doing here with the podcast. Thank you to our patrons, Cam, Chad Newsom, Corey Willingham, Candace Sisson, Ron Hayes, Teresa Marthathi, Titus Arthur, and Tyler Chandler. Thank you so much for your patronage. Next week, we're going to be kicking off our new series. We're going to be taking a look at concert films. Real short series. We're going to be doing the first week. We'll have Jazz on a Summer's Day, which I think we kind of decided is one of the, if not the earliest, but at least one of the earlier concert films. We're going to follow that up with Woodstock, then Stop Making Sense, which naturally had to be on there, and then we're going to be doing a double feature of Fade to Black by Jay-Z and Homecoming by Beyonce. So check it out. Those are going to be the next 4 weeks. And then we're going to be jumping into an October horror series for October. But we're still trying to kind of figure that one out. So concert movies and then October horror coming from Cinematary. So keep us on the dial. Until next week. Thank you all for listening.